Her billionaire husband got drunk at the company holiday party and decided to auction her off. Who wants to spend a night with my frump and listen to her squawk? Starting bid, $5. But when she walked into the ballroom, the real show began. A very beautiful story for my very beautiful family. Don't miss Chapter 8, a surprise for everyone. Let's start with love. $5. Who'll give me $5 for a night with my wife? The microphone caught every syllable. 400 people went silent in the specific way that only happens when something deeply wrong enters a room without being invited. Not the polite silence of anticipation, but the held-breath silence of collective disbelief. Glasses stopped mid-air. A woman near the back set her fork down without looking at it. The jazz band felt the stillness spreading toward them across the marble floor and let their instruments go quiet, one by one, like candles in a draught. Dean Young stood at the center of the stage with the microphone loose in his hand and a smile on his face that he genuinely believed was charming. He had been drinking since before the first course. Everyone in that room could see it. Most of them had been pretending they couldn't. "Come on," he said, warming to it now, carried forward by whiskey and the long habit of a man who had never once faced a crowd and failed to find approval waiting for him. "She doesn't do much. She mostly sits there and tells me what I'm doing wrong." He laughed at his own joke. Two men near the front laughed too, the reflex laughter of people who need the most powerful man in the room to like them. "Starting bid, $5. Who wants to spend a night listening to my frump squawk?" The word landed the way a slap lands, sudden, physical, leaving a mark. Frump. In the front row, Brett Calloway set his napkin on the table. He was 63 years old, the most respected investor in the room, a man who had built 3 companies from nothing and believed with complete conviction that character was the only currency that truly compounded. He looked at the stage, and his face held something that was not anger. Anger fades. What was on Brett Calloway's face was permanent. It was judgment. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. And then the ballroom doors opened. Mia Rose walked in. She had been in the lobby when it started, her phone at her ear, her mother's voice warm on the other end. She had heard Dean through the glass before she made out the words, just the tone, loose and aimed at something. She had lowered the phone and said, "Mom, I'll call you back." She stood with her hand flat against the door for 3 full seconds. Then she pushed it open and walked through. The dress was a deep wine color that moved when she moved, the kind of garment that doesn't announce itself, but that people remember long after the evening is over. Her hair was twisted low at the back of her neck, one gold bracelet at her wrist, the same one her mother had pressed into her palm the morning she had stood before the first building she ever designed and understood, for the first time, what it meant to make something permanent. She wore it tonight the way people carry the things that remind them of who they are when everything around them is trying to say otherwise. She crossed the threshold and the room turned. It moved the way a tide moves. First the tables nearest the doors, a quiet pivoting of heads, a woman who reached for her husband's arm without looking at him because her eyes had found Mia and would not let go. Then the next table, then the next. The ripple spread until even Dean, under the stage lights with the microphone still in his hand, was watching his wife walk through the crowd toward him. She was not hurrying. She did not look frightened. She looked like a woman who had already decided something. Brett Calloway rose from his chair. He straightened his jacket with both hands and began to applaud, slowly, deliberately, the kind of applause that is not celebration, but declaration. The woman beside him stood, then the couple behind her. Then in one motion, the room rose, and it did not rise for the company or the evening or Dean Young. It rose for the woman moving through the center of it all with a gold bracelet on her wrist and an expression that not one person there would ever quite be able to describe afterward, except to say she looked like someone who had already won something the rest of them hadn't figured out yet. Dean stood on the stage and watched it happen to him. The smile had gone somewhere and could not find its way back. Mia climbed the 3 steps without being invited. She crossed to where her husband stood and looked at him, not with fury, not with tears, but with something more devastating than either. She held out her hand. He gave her the microphone the way a child surrenders something he was never supposed to have, to no one. 1 beat of silence. Thank to no one. 1 beat of silence. Thank you for your kindness this evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. She set the microphone on the podium. She walked off the stage. She sat at her table, smoothed the napkin across her lap, and reached for her water glass as though she had simply returned from a brief conversation in the hall. Brett caught her eye from across the room. He gave her 1 slow nod. She returned it. Then she looked at her plate and breathed evenly and repeated what she had been repeating to herself for years, that she was steady, that she was fine, that not a single person in this room was going to watch her break. She held that promise through the rest of the evening. She held it through the drive home and through the sound of Dean's footsteps on the stairs and through the long, dark hours after the house went quiet. She held it until 2 in the morning, when she was alone at the kitchen table with her bracelet pressed between both palms, and then, without an audience, without performance, she cried, not from weakness, from the specific, bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had given 8 years of her finest self to a man who had just offered the room $5 for her company. She cried until she was finished. Then she washed her face and went to the window and looked at the city skyline. 1 building caught her eye, tall and clean-lined and honest, as if the person who designed it had refused to tell a single lie in its making. She had designed it, before Dean, before the years of invisibility, before the life she'd poured herself into had quietly, completely erased her name. It was still standing. So was she. She went to the small desk in the corner, hers, not his, bought because she needed 1 corner of this house that owed Dean Young nothing, opened her notebook to a clean page, and wrote 2 words at the top: Rose Architecture. She wrote until the sky outside softened from black to the dark blue that means morning is on its way. Then she put down the pen and looked at what she had started and felt, for the first time in longer than she could honestly measure, entirely like herself. Upstairs, Dean Young slept without dreaming. Downstairs, Mia Rose built the beginning of everything. Did the moment Mia took that microphone make you hold your breath? Or did you already know she was going to own that room? Chapter 2. What They Buried. The morning after the worst night of her marriage, Mia made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and called her mother. She did not pace. She did not rehearse what she would say. She pressed the phone to her ear, and when Gloria Rose answered after 2 rings and said quietly, "Baby, I already saw it," Mia understood that the night had grown far larger than the room it happened in. "How far has it gone?" Mia asked. "Far enough that your Aunt Patricia called me from out of state before sunrise." Gloria's voice had the texture it got when she was choosing each word carefully, testing it before letting it carry weight. "There's a video. Someone filmed everything. Brett Calloway standing. The room following him. You walking in." A pause. The caption on the most shared version says, "This woman is the most powerful person in that room, and her husband just proved he knows it." Mia said nothing for a moment. People were not sharing it because it was scandalous. They were sharing it because it was true, because it touched the particular, suffocating experience of being underestimated by the one person who was supposed to know your worth better than anyone. Mia understood this without being told. Understanding it and being at peace with it were 2 entirely different things. Upstairs, the first creak of floorboards. Dean was waking. "Tell me who I was before him," Mia said. "I need to hear it in another person's voice." I've been living inside his version of me for so long that my own feels like something I imagined. So, Gloria told her. She spoke about the girl who had come home from her first architecture class and talked for 3 hours straight about structures and light and human feeling without stopping to eat. Who had sketched on everything within reach, napkins, book covers, the backs of syllabuses. Who had looked at a skyline not with longing but with intention, with the grounded certainty that she was going to add something to it that wasn't there before. She talked about the scholarship, the firm that had come looking before graduation, the project on the eastern skyline, the real one, the one that had changed the city's profile, that Mia had led at an age when most designers were still learning which rules were worth breaking, the international attention that followed, the calls from firms in other countries. The developer who had said the intelligence of the work was unlike anything he had seen from someone so early in a career. "And then you met Dean," Gloria said. "It was not an accusation. It was a fact stated plainly, which is sometimes worse." "And I stopped," Mia said. "You redirected," Gloria said carefully. "You gave everything you had to something else." To someone else. Gloria didn't argue with that. After a moment, Mia said, "His company was failing when we met. 2 quarters from collapse. I could see it in the numbers when he couldn't see it in himself. I sat at a kitchen table in a different city and rebuilt his entire client strategy from nothing, rewrote the pitch documents, found revenue lines his team had completely missed. He presented it as his own thinking because he was convincing, and I was willing to be invisible." She paused. "Young Industries is standing today because of work I did. I have never said that sentence out loud until this moment." The silence on the line was full. "I know," Gloria said softly. Upstairs, the floorboards shifted again, closer to the stairs. "Mom," Mia said, "I have to go." "Mia!" Her mother's voice went low and deliberate, the voice of a woman delivering something important for the last time. "That building on the skyline has your intelligence in its bones. A man making a fool of himself at a microphone cannot reach back in time and unmake what you built, but you have to decide what you do now." Mia looked at the notebook on the desk. Rose Architecture. "I already have," she said. She ended the call. She stood still for a moment, listening to Dean's slow, careful footsteps on the stairs, the walk of a man whose body was settling its account with the night before. The kitchen door opened. He stood in the doorway in yesterday's dress shirt. His eyes carried the specific damage of a morning that had arrived without mercy. He opened his mouth. Mia picked up the page she had written before sunrise and laid it on the table between them. Her intention to separate. Her own handwriting, plain and complete and requiring nothing from him. Not argument, not response, not understanding. Dean looked at it, then at her. "Mia." "The coffee is still warm," she said. She picked up her bag, her coat and her notebook, and she walked out the front door into the grey morning without looking back. She had known for a long time that looking back was only useful when you intended to return. Do you believe some people only show you who they truly are when they think the consequences will fall on someone else? Chapter 3. The morning he sobered up, Dean Young had never once stood in his own kitchen and felt small. He stood there now. The coffee was warm. Mia had made it before leaving, and this was somehow worse than if she had left the kitchen dark and empty. It meant she had stood at the counter in the early hours while he slept off what he had done, and she had still made the coffee. That one small act held more dignity than anything he had managed in years, and he understood it immediately, and the understanding settled into his chest like something with no intention of leaving. He read her note 3 times. Each time it said the same thing. His phone had not stopped vibrating since he came downstairs. He knew without looking. His PR director, his assistant, the board contacts, who only called when something needed managing. He did not feel capable of managing anything, because the clarity that arrives the morning after is a specific and brutal thing, and what it was showing him today was not a situation. It was himself. He had stood on a stage in front of 400 people and auctioned his wife for $5. He had used the word frump. He had laughed. He opened his phone. 41 missed calls. His assistant's message read, "Call me before you do anything." Below it, a link. He pressed it and watched the video. He watched it twice. The second time, he watched his own face during the part he couldn't have seen from the stage, the moment the room rose for her. He watched himself standing under the lights, while 400 people got to their feet for the woman he had just humiliated, and he saw in his own expression the precise instant the whiskey confidence drained out of him, and what remained was just a man, fully exposed, who had done something irreversible in front of everyone who mattered. His PR director answered on the first ring. "The comments aren't about you," she said immediately. "If they were about you, we could manage the narrative. But they're almost entirely about her. The way she walked in, Brett Calloway standing, the way she took the microphone." A pause. "The world has decided your wife is someone. The only question now is what story you're living in." "What would you suggest?" Dean said. Even as he said it, he heard the hollowness. A man reaching for strategy when the wound was somewhere strategy couldn't reach. "Call her," she said simply. The call ended. He sat at the table and thought about calling Mia. He opened her name, held his phone, set it down. He was not afraid of her anger. He had spent years navigating that, deflecting it, waiting it out. He was afraid of the thing he had seen in her face when she took the microphone, that absolute, composed clarity. Anger meant you still had a stake. What Mia had shown the room last night was beyond anger. It was conclusion, and a man cannot argue with a conclusion or charm his way around it or outlast it. His mother called at noon. Eleanor Young was 71. She had survived a great deal with a composure that people mistook for coldness, which was actually something far more durable than coldness. She spoke to her son in a voice so controlled it was almost gentle. "Dean, I have watched you make mistakes for 50 years. I have defended you, explained you, and covered for you more times than you know. I will not be doing that this time." A pause filled with nothing, which was worse than anything she could have put inside it. "That woman is better than you. She has always been better than you. And last night you made certain the entire world agrees with me." She ended the call. He sat in the house that suddenly felt enormous, every room now a register of her absence. The small desk in the kitchen corner, empty. The shelf of architecture books with their broken and rebroken spines. The reading chair by the window with the folded blanket on its arm. He had walked past that chair 10,000 times. He had never once asked what she was reading in it. He noticed everything now, the way you notice a room after someone has been removed from it. Frank Hewitt arrived in the afternoon without calling. He let himself in with the key he had carried for years and found Dean still at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's shirt. Frank was a plain-spoken man with no patience for theater of any kind. He sat down and was quiet for a moment. "I'm not here about the video," Frank said. "I'm here because I've been your partner for 11 years and I owe you honesty." He folded his hands on the table. "This morning, I traced every major relationship this company has. Howard Greer, Philip Tate, the Hargrove account, the Montgomery retention strategy. And every single one of them ran through Mia. She built those bridges, Dean. She maintained them. And you wore them like they were yours." He stood slowly. "Fix this. Not for the company. For yourself. Because the man I've known for 11 years is better than who I saw on that stage last night." He paused at the door. "I hope." He left. Dean sat until the light went. He did not eat. He looked at the whiskey bottle on the counter and felt something in him recoil from it in a way it never had before. He called Mia. 4 rings, then voicemail. He opened his mouth and found he had nothing equal to what he had done. He ended the call without speaking. He sat in the dark of the house she had made beautiful and thought about all the ways a person can spend years quietly destroying the best thing in their life without ever once turning to look directly at what they are doing. Outside, the city went on without him. Somewhere inside it, his wife was writing the first pages of a future with no room for his name. Have you ever watched someone understand, only when it was already too late, exactly what they had? Tell me what you think Dean deserves. Chapter 4. The Empty House. Mia's new apartment had white walls and large windows and no history in it at all. That was the first thing she felt when she walked in. The silence had a completely different quality. In Dean's house, silence had always been a condition she was responsible for maintaining. Here it was simply quiet, clean and unburdened, and entirely hers. She set her bag on the counter, stood in the center of the room, and took a breath that went all the way down. She had taken very little with her: clothes, architecture books, her notebook, her bracelet, everything she needed, everything unambiguously her own. The apartment belonged to an old colleague working overseas for several months. It looked like luck. Mia knew it wasn't. It was the result of maintaining friendships carefully through years when her world had contracted to the size of a house and a husband and a quiet desk in the corner. She had kept those threads without knowing she was building something to catch herself. She knew it now. She made tea and sat and opened her notebook and kept working. Rose architecture was not a dream she was nursing. It was a plan under construction. She worked the way she had always worked best, methodically, without sentiment, laying the structure of an idea with the same honesty she brought to actual buildings. What she had, what she needed, the gap and what it would take to close it, what she was willing to do. She was not willing to ask Dean for a single thing. She was not willing to wait. Back across the city, Dean was learning what her absence meant in the specific practical language of consequence. It came by degrees, not loudly, but in the withdrawal of things so familiar they had become invisible. The Thursday dry cleaning was not ready because Mia had managed the account and he hadn't known there was an account to manage. The dinner with Bryce Hargrove, among the company's most important long-term clients, had been built on the friendship Mia had cultivated with Bryce's wife Donna through years of genuine attention. When Dean's assistant called to confirm and Donna asked for Mia, the pause that followed a simple "she won't be attending" carried more information than a full conversation. They cancelled the following morning. Dean's assistant Renee delivered the Tuesday correspondence and, because she was a woman of real integrity, and this moment was one that integrity required something of, she set the folders on his desk and said, "Mr. Young, what happened at the gala is being discussed in every office in this building, and the discussion is not going in the direction you might hope." He looked up. "The women," Renee said quietly, "are not going to forget that word." She left. He sat behind his desk and looked at his office, the size of it, the way it had always arranged itself around his comfort and authority, the unquestioned ease of a man whose position had never once been asked to justify itself, and felt its dimensions differently than he ever had. That same afternoon across the city, Mia's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. The number was professional and unknown, and she was deep in the section of the business plan that needed her full attention. She answered anyway, the way you answer the calls you almost don't, because something in you already knows. Mia rose. The voice was direct and warm, a woman fully in command of her own time. "My name is Diane Okafor. We worked together briefly at Harman and Blake years ago. I don't expect you to remember." Mia remembered her immediately. 3 years ahead of her at the firm, formidably talented, the kind of professional whose work you quietly studied because it was worth the study. "I remember you very well," Mia said. "Good. Then you know I don't call people to pass time." Brief and certain. "I'm running my own firm. We've been offered a large-scale mixed residential and civic commission, the kind that comes along rarely." The client attached a condition to the offer. A pause. "They want you." by name. They remembered the skyline building and they want the mind that made it. Mia was quiet for a moment. That was a long time ago, she said. The building is still standing, Diane said simply. The mind that made it doesn't have an expiry date. Are you available to meet? Mia looked at the white walls, the clean light, the kitchen table covered in the notes for a future she was building from bare ground. Yes, she said. I'm very available. She set the phone down and sat with the particular warmth of being found. Not discovered. She had never been lost. Found. Called back by her own name after years of being known only as someone else's. She opened a fresh page in her notebook. At the top she wrote, Rose Architecture, Phase 1. She underlined it. Then, because it deserved it, she underlined it again. When someone finally calls you by your real name after years of being known as someone else's, what does that moment feel like? Tell me. Chapter 5. The Return of Her Name. Diane Okafor's office had good bones and better light, the kind of space that tells you everything about the person who works in it before a single word is spoken. That they believe environment is conversation. That they have thought carefully about what surrounds them and chosen accordingly. Mia noticed all of this before she sat down. Within 4 minutes, Diane had laid the project across the table, face up, nothing withheld. Large scale, mixed civic and residential, the kind of commission that asks not just for technical ability, but for a philosophy. What do people need from the spaces they inhabit? What does a neighborhood owe the people who live inside it? Mia had been answering those questions since she was 22 years old. She leaned over the preliminary drawings and within 10 minutes was talking the way she talked when something real locked her mind in. Not presenting, not performing, simply thinking out loud, the gap between her thoughts and her voice completely closed. She had 3 distinct directions before her coffee was finished. By the time she stood to leave, stopped. I didn't stop, Mia said. I stopped. I didn't stop, Mia said. I stopped being visible. Diane looked at her, not with pity, which Mia would not have sat still for, but with the quiet recognition of one woman who understood the cost of invisibility, acknowledging it in another. You're visible now, Diane said. Mia began the following week and was extraordinary in the way that only comes from years of thought that had nowhere to go, concentrated, precise, every instinct sharpened by years of compression. The junior designer on the team, Will, asked her on the 3rd day how she thought about the relationship between a building's exterior and its interior experience. She spent 45 minutes answering that question. He told her afterward it was the most useful conversation of his professional life. She came home each evening tired in the way that honest work makes you tired, emptied and full at the same time. It was on a site visit at the end of the 2nd week that she met Rowan Adler. He was already there when she arrived, unhurried in the way of people who have made genuine peace with silence, studying the eastern boundary of the site with methodical, quiet attention. Diane introduced them. Structural consultant, brought in by the client. Mia recognized his name immediately. She recognized it because years ago, in a design journal she had read alone in the early hours of a morning in Dean's house, she had found an interview with Rowan Adler in which he had been asked to name the most honest structure built in the city in his lifetime. He had named hers. He had not known her name. The project had been published under the firm's credit, and her contribution had been, like so many things, quietly absorbed. But he had described the building's intelligence, its refusal to be impressive at the expense of being truthful, in words that had made her sit at 2 in the morning and cry in a way she had never been able to explain to anyone. She had never told a soul. Now she stood on the site and shook his hand and said her name and watched his face as the connection arrived. Mia Rose, he said, the way you say a name you've said before in a different context. The Skyline building. Yes, she said. He looked at her, not with performance, not with flattery, with the genuine, unguarded expression of a person who believed in something abstractly for years and has just found it standing in front of them in ordinary afternoon light. "I wrote about that building," he said. "I know," she said. "I read it." A pause that was comfortable in the way that pauses between the right people always are. "I didn't know who designed it," he said. "Most people didn't," she said. "I'm changing that." They walked the site together that afternoon and talked in the focused, unguarded way of two people who speak the same language and are quietly relieved to have found another person who does. He pushed back on two of her ideas, not to assert himself but because he disagreed, and he said so clearly and directly. She reconsidered one and held her ground on the other, and he listened fully, and then said, with nothing performed about it, "You're right. I missed something." She did not respect him for agreeing. She respected him for disagreeing honestly, and then being willing to change. That night, Rowan sat alone at his desk after a long day and thought about a building he had written about years ago, and the woman who had made it, and how the world had a way of eventually correcting its own omissions. Across the city, frightened and shrinking, Dean had done something he would not speak of openly for a long time. He had called a contact at his PR firm and asked, carefully, in the language of men who want results without fingerprints, to keep a quiet watch on what Mia was doing, who she was meeting, what she was building. The contact agreed without hesitation. Dean told himself it was about protecting his interests. Somewhere beneath that, he knew it was about being unable to release what he had broken. Because releasing it meant looking at what he had done with nothing between himself and the full truth of it, and that particular honesty was the one thing Dean Young had spent his entire life constructing detours around. Would you have walked away sooner? Or does loving someone keep us long past the moment we should have left? Tell me honestly. Chapter 6. The Crack in the Empire. The board meeting was scheduled for 40 minutes. It lasted 22, and the missing 18 minutes were made entirely of empty chairs and careful faces. Dean sat at the head of the table and looked at the people arranged around it. Faces he had known for years, people who had raised glasses with him and nodded reliably when he spoke, and saw something he had never seen in any of them before. A reserve. A small, deliberate pulling back, the way a person steps away from something without yet turning to leave. Two chairs were empty. Howard Greer and Philip Tate, the board members with whom the company had its oldest and most significant relationships, had sent identical messages that morning through their assistants. Prior commitments, sincere regrets. They would be in touch. They were not in touch. After the room cleared, Frank stayed in his seat and looked at the empty chairs. "Howard's wife has known Mia for 6 years," he said. "Philip's daughter interned at an architecture firm Mia personally arranged for her. Those were not business relationships, Dean. Those were Mia's relationships. She built them from nothing, year after year, and you benefited from every one of them without once thinking about what it would look like if she stopped." "I'll call Howard," Dean said. Frank looked at him steadily. "And say what, exactly?" Dean had nothing. He went back to his office and found himself, without deciding to, opening the video again. Not his part of it, hers. He watched Mia cross the ballroom floor, the way she moved, carrying nothing she didn't need, belonging entirely to herself. He watched Brett Calloway rise. He watched 400 people who had spent the evening performing important suddenly, collectively, become genuine, standing for a woman who hadn't asked them to and didn't appear to require it. His phone rang. "Brett Calloway," he answered. "I'm not calling about the gala," Brett said in his measured, unhurried way. "Everything I needed to say about that evening I said with how I spent it. I'm calling because I intend to do something and I believe you deserve to hear it from me directly." A pause. "I'm going to reach out to your wife, professionally. I've admired her work for years, and what she has done in the past weeks tells me she is building something important. I intend to offer my support, financial and otherwise. Another pause, deliberate. I'm not asking your permission. I'm extending you the courtesy of knowing before it happens, because I think you should understand what quality of woman you had and what she is becoming without you. The call ended before Dean could respond. He sat at his desk with the phone in his hand and felt the specific, cold quality of a man watching his world rearrange itself around an absence he created. That evening, Brett reached Mia at her desk in the white apartment. "I want to be direct," Brett said. "I've followed your work since before the Skyline project. I've watched what you've done since the gala, and I believe you are building something that deserves serious backing. I'd like to fund the launch of Rose Architecture, not as a favor, not out of sentiment. Because in 40 years of investing in people, I have learned to recognize genuine excellence, and I have no intention of watching it underfund itself." Mia looked at the business plan on her desk, what she needed, what she had, the gap between them. She thought about being careful. She thought about being bold. She had spent 8 years being careful. "I have a full proposal ready," she said. "I'd like to meet." "I expected nothing less," he said. She called Diane the moment the line cleared. Diane listened and then laughed. A full, real laugh, the kind that doesn't ask permission. "Mia Rose," she said, "it is well past time." Then Mia called her mother. Gloria answered and listened, and went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with words. Then she said, in a voice almost too full to hold itself, "Your grandmother would be standing in the middle of her kitchen right now talking to nobody in particular about what her granddaughter is doing." Mia laughed, unprepared for it, completely genuine, from somewhere that had nothing to do with performance. It surprised her. Then it didn't. She sat in the warmth of it after the call ended, in the clean quiet of the white apartment, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than happiness, and far more durable. She felt like someone whose feet were on ground that belonged entirely to her. When the right opportunity finally arrives after years of waiting, do you trust yourself and step forward, or do you hesitate? Tell me. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The invitation went to 300 people. Every single one of them came. Mia had given her time to the work. The presentation boards, the portfolio, the design philosophy document that said in plain and unsparing language what Rose Architecture believed about the relationship between a structure and the human life that would unfold inside it. She wanted anyone who walked through the door to understand immediately that this was not a celebration. It was a statement. This is what I do. This is what I have always done. This is what I intend to keep doing without apology. Diane Okafor was there in a dress the color of deep water, standing the way she stood at everything, as someone who had long since earned the right to take up exactly as much space as she wanted. Brett Calloway arrived with 2 members of his investment team and went directly to the presentation boards, where he stood reading in silence for a long time, which was more meaningful than anything he could have said aloud. Several architects who had spent years wondering where the mind behind the Skyline building had disappeared came and stood in front of that portfolio and found their answer. Rowan Adler arrived 20 minutes in, still in his work clothes, which told her he had come directly from the site and felt no need to explain that. He found her talking to a young architecture student who had written to the firm's new website 2 days earlier, asking if he could attend. She had replied within the hour. When the conversation ended, Rowan stepped forward. "You built this fast," he said. "I built it slowly," she said. "Over 8 years, in the only space I had." She touched her chest briefly. He understood without her elaborating and didn't try to make it larger than it was. "It shows," he said. Diane spoke first. No podium, no notes. She spoke about talent and time and what happens to exceptional work when the world doesn't know where to look for it. She spoke about Mia the way one serious professional speaks about another, when the respect is genuine, without decoration, without inflation, with the authority of someone who has watched the work and is telling the truth about it. Brett spoke next, brief and exact. He said that in 40 years of backing people and ideas, he had followed one principle: find the ones who are building something they believe in even when no one is watching. Mia Rose, he said, has been building something she believed in for a very long time. I am proud to stand at the beginning of what comes next. Rowan spoke last, unscheduled. Diane introduced him with a slight smile that suggested she had suspected he might say something and left space for it without telling him. He stood at the front of the room and said, "Some years ago, I was asked to name the most honest structure built in this city in my lifetime. I named a building on the east skyline. I said it had the intelligence of something made by a person who refused to tell a single architectural lie." He paused and looked at Mia across the room. "I didn't know her name then. I know it now. Her name is Mia Rose. And if this work in front of you tonight is any indication, the building I named was only her first sentence." The room was still. Then it was not. Across the city, at the hotel where Dean had scheduled a young industries investor dinner, the same evening, a coincidence Mia had not engineered but had not avoided, everything was technically correct. The table settings were precise. Dean spoke with the controlled ease of a man who'd been performing confidence for 20 years and could do it on reflex. 2 chairs at his table were empty. The guests meant to fill them were at Mia's launch. Dean found out at 11 from a message his PR contact sent. Both attended the Rose Architecture event. Coverage is significant. He read it in the back of his car, the city moving past the window. He asked the driver to go east. When they reached the right block, he rolled the window down and looked up at the building on the skyline, clean and tall and sure of itself, exactly what it was and nothing it was not, standing in the night the same way it had stood every night for years, whether anyone was looking or not. He looked at it for a long time. "Take me home," he said. He said it quietly, the way a man speaks when there is no longer anyone he is performing for. When someone finally steps into the light they were always meant to stand in, what does it feel like to witness? Tell me below. Chapter 8. His lowest moment. The bid document was 40 pages and 3 weeks of real work. Mia and Diane's team had built something genuinely exceptional, not the inflated exceptional of people close to their own efforts, but the kind that exists when a thing has been thought through entirely and executed without a single shortcut. The public commission was significant. The committee had a strong reputation for considered, transparent decisions. The response came on a Tuesday morning. Mia read the email twice, then she set her phone face down on the desk and sat still, not reacting, waiting for the shape of it to become clear. They had been passed over. She had lost bids before. Every firm loses bids, and loss is simply part of the work. But the language nagged at her. The speed. The phrase, "another direction," without elaboration, from a committee known for specificity in its communications. She called Diane. Diane had already heard. A contact on a peripheral advisory board connected to the committee had called that morning, not with details, but with discomfort. The message was thin and carefully worded. A question had been raised from outside the review process about the financial backing of Rose Architecture, not a formal challenge, nothing with a name attached. A quiet question, a nudge in a direction, the kind that plants just enough doubt to shift a decision without leaving anything you can pull out and examine. Diane named the source before Mia asked. It came through someone connected to Young Industries. The room went very quiet. Mia stood at the window and looked at the city and felt something move through her that was colder and more precise than anger. She had known Dean's full range, the pride, the carelessness, the lifelong habit of a man who had never developed the capacity to sit with loss. But this was something different. This was a man reaching into the future she was building and trying quietly to damage it. She thought one word: afraid. Not herself. Him. He was afraid of what she was becoming, of the size and reality of it, of the way the world was meeting her, with exactly the recognition his management of her had been designed to prevent. And frightened men who have run out of legitimate options will reach for whatever is close. "I want to document everything from the beginning," she said. "Already started," Diane said. Rowan was at the site when Mia arrived that afternoon. He looked up as she crossed the yard, read her face, and set down what he was holding without being asked. She told him what had happened. He listened without interrupting, without performing outrage on her behalf, without positioning himself as anything other than a person fully present and paying attention. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "He's afraid of you," he said. "I know," she said. "That's not an excuse," he said. "It's information. It tells you what he might do next." She looked at him. There was a quality in the way he engaged with hard things, a combination of clarity and steadiness that had nothing to do with performance. He was not managing her feelings or trying to be strong for her. He was simply honest, the same way he was always honest, which was the rarest thing she knew. "What do I need right now?" she said, more to herself than to him. "You already know," he said. "I need to keep working," she said. "Then let's keep working," he said. They went back to the site. That evening her mother called. Gloria's voice, when she said hello, had a specific, careful quality to it, compressed, working to hold its level. Mia heard it immediately. "I need to come and see you," Gloria said. "There is something I should have told you a long time ago. I've been carrying it since before the gala, and what Dean has done this week has made my mind up." A pause waited with years. "I can't do this on the phone. Can I come Saturday?" "Yes," Mia said. "Of course." She set the phone down and sat with the particular unsettled feeling of knowing something important is approaching without yet knowing its shape. She wrote for a while, called Diane, made soup, did all the things that kept the present moment purposeful. But when the lights were out and the apartment was quiet, she thought about her mother's voice, the weight in it, the care with which it had been held in place, and understood that whatever Gloria was carrying, she had been carrying it for a very long time. When someone who hurt you tries to reach into your future to take something else, do you fight or do you focus and build anyway? Tell me what you would do. Chapter 9. What Gloria knew. Gloria Rose arrived on a Saturday morning with a tin of ginger biscuits, not the sweet occasion kind, the ones she had always made for serious conversations, the ones where a person needs something to do with their hands so the rest of them can do what is necessary. Mia recognized them before the lid came off. She had set the table with 2 cups and a full pot of strong tea. They sat across from each other in the clean morning light, and Mia watched her mother arrange the biscuits with a care that had nothing to do with presentation. She waited. She had learned patience from this woman and applied it completely. Gloria wrapped both hands around her cup. "When you met Dean," she said, "you were standing at the edge of something extraordinary. We both know that. But there are things that happened during that time that you don't know fully." She looked at her daughter. "Do you remember the International Commission? The London developer?" Mia went still. She remembered it exactly. Early in her relationship with Dean, before the engagement, the Skyline building freshly complete, and the design world beginning to understand what she was capable of. The developer had asked for her specifically. The project was significant, the kind that shapes a career's entire direction. She had felt the pull of it with a clarity that belonged entirely to her professional self. She had stayed. She had always believed she chose to stay freely because it had felt like a free choice. The invisible years had been survivable. She had always had that. The belief that she had been the author of that particular decision. "What happened, Mom?" she said. Gloria straightened her back. Dean came to see me alone, she said, before the engagement. He said he wanted my blessing, wanted me to know how serious he was about you. We had coffee and he was warm, and I did believe he loved you in the way he was capable of loving things. She paused. But in the middle of the conversation, he said he was worried, that the London project would take you away from the life you were building together, that the distance frightened him. He was very careful. It didn't sound like interference. It sounded like a man sharing his fear with the woman who would be his mother-in-law, asking for wisdom. Mia looked at her. "And you called me," Mia said. "I called you," Gloria said. "Not because he told me to, because I believed he was right, because I believed in the romantic version of the story, that love was the real choice and the career would always be there." Her voice dropped. "So I called, and we talked for a long time about whether the distance was worth it. I asked if you were running toward something or away from something. I framed it as a mother helping her daughter think clearly. A pause that held everything. I was giving Dean's hand on the scale the language of wisdom." The apartment was completely still. Mia sat with it. She remembered that conversation in precise detail. She had always held it as one that helped her choose clearly. Her mother's measured voice asking her to be honest with herself. She had believed she was making a free decision with her clearest judgment, supported by the person who had always helped her see truly. She had been making a managed decision, and the person who had managed it had stood in her kitchen every morning for 8 years, drinking coffee from the pot she made, wearing success built at the table that was no longer hers. She sat with that for a long time. Gloria's eyes were full but controlled, not performing, not asking out loud for the forgiveness she was sitting in the presence of, just bearing it, willing to be seen with it. "I only understood what I had done later," Gloria said. "After the invisible years began, I told myself it had only been a conversation. But Mia, a conversation is never just a conversation when the person who asked for it knew precisely what they were asking for." Mia looked at her hands on the table. She thought about the Skyline building, standing in the city whether anyone was looking or not. She thought about a girl with a scholarship and a notebook full of buildings and a whole future shining openly in front of her. She thought about a London project that went to someone else, about a career that had bent inward around one man's private fear, about all the decisions that had appeared to be hers. "Mia," Gloria said, "I am deeply, completely sorry." Mia looked at her mother. "I know you are," she said, not coldly, steadily. They sat together for a long time. They ate the biscuits. The tea went cold, and Mia made more. They talked the way mothers and daughters talk when the hard thing has been said and survived, not about what came next, but in the way of people returning to the love that was always underneath everything else, which had never moved an inch. Gloria left in the early afternoon. Mia stood in the quiet apartment and was still. At 7:30, her phone lit up. A voicemail. Dean's number. She pressed play. His voice was not the voice from the stage. It was not performing. It was just a man in a quiet room, speaking with nowhere left to hide. "Mia, I know you don't have to listen to this. I know you don't owe me anything. Not a conversation, not a minute, nothing. I know that." A long pause. "But there are things I need to say to your face, not through lawyers, not in a voicemail that lets me keep a safe distance, to your face, because I have been a coward my whole life, in ways I am only now beginning to see, and sending you this message is already proving it." His breath, slow and unsteady. "I am asking, if there was ever anything real between us, and I believe there was, I believe we both knew it once. Please give me 1 hour." The message ended. Mia held the phone. She looked out at the skyline. The building was there where it always was, permanent and honest, indifferent to being observed, entirely certain of what it was. She opened her messages and found Rowan's name. She looked at it without typing. Outside, the city moved through its evening the way cities do, continuous and indifferent and full of lives going in every direction at once. She set the phone down. She went to the desk and wrote until late, and when she finally slept, she slept deeply. The way you sleep when something unresolved for a very long time has quietly, finally, found its true shape. Do you believe people can truly change, or do they only ever show you different versions of who they always were? Tell me before the final chapter. Chapter 10. The Queen does not kneel. Dean Young arrived 6 minutes early. He introduced himself at the reception desk and said he had an appointment with Mia Rose. Then he stood in the waiting area and looked at the office. It was not what he had expected. He could not have said precisely what he had expected. Something provisional, perhaps, still carrying the quality of a beginning. Instead, the space had authority. Not the borrowed kind that money buys in surfaces, but the earned kind that comes from a place knowing exactly what it is. Light came through high windows and lay across the presentation boards on the east wall. Real projects, real work. The unmistakable evidence of a mind fully engaged with what it was put on earth to do. He stood and looked at it and felt something he had no clean name for, and then found it. The recognition of what he had spent 8 years managing down. Mia appeared at the inner office doorway. She was dressed simply, clean lines, nothing that asked anything of anyone. She looked rested. She looked, he thought, with a pain that was entirely private and entirely deserved, like a woman who had arrived somewhere and knew it. "Dean," she said. "Mia, thank you for seeing me." She led him in. He sat across the desk. She folded her hands and looked at him with the same expression she had worn at the microphone, not fury, not warmth, but the thing that was harder than either, complete and total clarity. He had written it down and thrown the paper away. He did not want notes. Notes were a way of managing the thing rather than inhabiting it. He told her he was wrong. He told her that for years he had understood, at a depth he refused to examine, that she was more talented and more genuinely substantial than he was, and instead of being enlarged by that, he had spent their marriage making himself the center of her world so completely that she had no room to see past him. He told her he had known about London. He said it plainly. He had gone to Gloria and used her mother's love as a deliberate instrument, and he had been conscious enough of what he was doing to make the choice, and then spent years burying the memory of it. His voice held. It was close. He told her about the bid. He named what he had done without softening, that he had given the instruction, that he had known while doing it, that it was the act of a man with nothing legitimate left to use. He said it without excuse. "You made me possible, Mia," he said, "not in the way people mean when they say that. Literally. You sat at our kitchen table and saved my company, and I took what you built and put my name on it and told myself that was acceptable because we were a team. We were not a team. I was standing in light you made and calling it mine. For years." He stopped. "And I kept making the choice smaller until you believed you had chosen it freely." The office held the silence. "I am asking you," he said, "to let me spend whatever time I have left making that right. I am not asking because I expect you to say yes. I am asking because not asking is one more act of cowardice, and I no longer have any tolerance for who that makes me." Mia looked at him. She took her time. He did not rush her, which was perhaps the most honest thing he had done in years. "I believe you," she said. "What you just said is real, and I can hear that it's real." She held his gaze without effort. "I forgive you, not for your sake, for mine, because I am not willing to carry this any further than today." He looked at her. "But Dean." Her voice was steady and final and without cruelty. "You built something out of love that functioned like a cage. I spent 8 years making it beautiful without understanding what I was doing. I understand it now, completely. A pause. And I will not go back inside. He nodded. Once. Slow. Is there someone? He asked, without claim, simply. There is someone who sees me, she said, that's all. He stood, extended his hand across the desk. She shook it. Real, unperformed, clean. He turned toward the door and stopped. He looked through the glass wall at the presentation boards, and beyond them, through the window, at the skyline. The building stood in the late light the way it always had, honest and permanent, needing nothing from anyone. That building, he said. He didn't turn around. I told people for years I had supported you through the process, that we had worked on it together. A long pause. I never did a single thing for that project. You designed every line of it alone, and it changed the shape of this city, and I wore the marriage around it like a credit I had earned. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to say that anymore. He opened the door and walked out into the street below, and she watched him from the window until the city absorbed him. Then she let out a long, slow breath. She picked up her phone. She opened Rowan's name and typed 3 words, ready for dinner. His reply came in seconds, been ready, always. She looked at the skyline. The building stood in it the way it had always stood, honest, permanent, entirely certain of what it was and what it had always been. She had made that. She had made this office, this firm, this life. She had, across the long invisible years and the blazing months that followed, made herself. Mia Rose stood at the window of her own office, in the city that carried her work in its bones, and she was not waiting for anything, not recovering from anything, not beginning anything. She had already arrived, and she was completely and permanently home. Did Mia Rose get everything she deserved, or is this only the first chapter of something even greater? Tell me in the comments, and share this story with someone who needs to read it today, that we had worked on it together. A long pause. I never did a single thing for that project. You designed every line of it alone, and it changed the shape of this city, and I wore the marriage around it like a credit I had earned. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to say that anymore. He opened the door and walked out into the street below, and she watched him from the window until the city absorbed him. Then she let out a long, slow breath. She picked up her phone. She opened Rowan's name and typed 3 words, ready for dinner. His reply came in seconds, been ready, always. She looked at the skyline. The building stood in it the way it had always stood, honest, permanent, entirely certain of what it was and what it had always been. She had made that. She had made this office, this firm, this life. She had, across the long invisible years and the blazing months that followed, made herself. Mia Rose stood at the window of her own office, in the city that carried her work in its bones, and she was not waiting for anything, not recovering from anything, not beginning anything. She had already arrived, and she was completely and permanently home. Did Mia Rose get everything she deserved, or is this only the first chapter of something even greater? Tell me in the comments, and share this story with someone who needs to read it today.